Aisha Monroe sits handcuffed in a grimy airport cell, her 6-year-old daughter Naya sobbing beside her, tears streaking her tiny face, while Karen Whitlock, a flight attendant with a venomous smirk, watches through the glass. Just hours ago, Aisha boarded a plane dreaming of a new life. But a spilled juice turned her world upside down, chaining her to a nightmare of racial hate. Karen thinks she's crushed them, clueless about the legal giant Aisha's summoning. What unleashed this chaos? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more gripping tales. Aisha Monroe rushed through the sprawling chaos of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, her 32-year-old frame weighed down by a threadbare duffel bag slung over one shoulder, and the small, sticky hand of her 6-year-old daughter, Naya, tugging at her other arm. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, drowned out by the cacophony of rolling suitcases, blaring announcements, and the hum of 1,000 hurried voices. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not just from the August heat seeping through the terminal's glass walls, but from the gnawing hope that pulsed in her chest. Seattle awaited them, a city she'd pinned her dreams on. A fresh start after years of clawing through a life that kept kicking her down. A new job as a community health coordinator dangled just beyond this 5-hour flight. A lifeline after she'd lost everything blowing the whistle on a racist hospital administrator back in Georgia. That fight had cost her a nursing career, her savings, and too many sleepless nights. But it had forged her into something tougher, a woman who wouldn't bend. Nia, oblivious to the stakes, bounced beside her, her puffy pigtails swaying as she clutched a plastic unicorn toy. Its glitter flaking onto her yellow dress. They reached Gate B13 with minutes to spare, the boarding line already snaking past rows of plastic chairs. Aisha fished their crumpled tickets from her jeans pocket, her tired brown eyes scanning the gate number twice to be sure. She'd scraped together every penny for these seats, a budget airline deal that barely covered the one-way trip. Her stomach growled, a reminder they'd skipped breakfast to catch the pre-dawn cab. But she forced a smile as Naya pointed at the plane hulking outside the floor-to-ceiling window. Its silver body gleamed under the Georgia sun. Engine silent for now, a beast waiting to carry them west. "Look, Mama, it's huge," Nia chirped, her voice bright with wonder, her wide eyes reflecting the aircraft's curves. Aisha knelt, smoothing a hand over Nia's curls, the softness grounding her. "Yeah, baby girl, it's your first time flying. Gonna be a big adventure, right?" Her tone was warm, threaded with exhaustion, but she meant it. This wasn't just a flight, it was a leap toward something better, a chance to rebuild. The line shuffled forward, passengers ahead flashing glossy boarding passes and wheeling sleek luggage that dwarfed Aisha's scuffed duffel. She hoisted it higher, feeling the frayed strap dig into her shoulder, and caught a flicker of disdain from a white woman in a tailored blazer nearby. The woman's lips pursed, her gaze sliding over Aisha's faded jacket and Nia's thrift store sneakers, like they were stains on the terminal floor. Aisha's jaw tightened, a familiar pang of self-consciousness flaring in her gut. She'd seen that look too many times, the one that sized her up and found her wanting. But she straightened her spine and nudged Nia along. They weren't here to impress anyone. They were here to survive. The gate agent, a harried young man with a buzz cut, waved them up, his scanner beeping as it read their tickets. "Welcome aboard," he mumbled, eyes already on the next passenger, and Aisha guided Nia down the jetway, the cool tunnel air a brief relief from the muggy terminal. Stepping into the plane's narrow cabin felt like crossing a threshold. The recycled air hummed with the buzz of overhead bins clacking open and shut, passengers jostling for space. Aisha scanned the seat numbers, her ticket clutched tight, and spotted their row near the back, 27C and D, a middle and window combo. She steered Nia past a sea of elbows and knees, murmuring apologies as her duffel bumped a man's armrest. He grunted, a stocky guy in a polo shirt, but didn't look up from his phone. Nia scampered into the window seat, pressing her nose to the scratched plastic pane, her unicorn clutched tight. "I can see the wings, Mama," she squealed, her voice cutting through the cabin's low roar. Aisha chuckled, a flicker of pride, easing the knot in her chest. Nia's joy was her anchor, the reason she kept pushing through the muck life shoveled her way. She hefted the duffel toward the overhead bin, her arms straining as the bag's bulk caught on the edge. It was heavier than it looked, stuffed with their clothes, Naya's toys, and a few canned goods she couldn't afford to leave behind. Her fingers slipped, the bag teetering, and a soft curse escaped her lips. Before she could wrestle it back, a shadow loomed over her, sharp and unyielding. "Move it along!" a woman's voice snapped, crisp and cold as a winter wind. Aisha turned, meeting the flinty gaze of a flight attendant, her uniform pressed to perfection, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. The name tag pinned to her navy blazer read, Karen Whitlock, and her thin lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Her blue eyes raked over Aisha, lingering on the damp spot where Nia had spilled a sip of water earlier. Then, flicked to Naya herself, who was now kicking the seat in front of her with glee. "Charity cases clogging up my flight again," Karen muttered, loud enough for Aisha to hear but soft enough to dodge a direct challenge. Aisha froze, her pulse spiking as the words landed like a slap. She'd heard worse, sure, but the casual venom in Karen's tone sliced deeper than usual, a blade wrapped in politeness. Her hands tightened on the duffel, knuckles whitening, and she forced herself to breathe. Not here, not now, she thought, shoving the bag into the bin with a grunt. It clicked shut, and she dropped into the middle seat beside Nia, her heart thudding against her ribs. Karen lingered a moment longer, her stare a silent dare, before pivoting on her polished heels to greet the next passengers with a syrupy "welcome aboard" that hadn't been offered to Aisha. The contrast stung, but Aisha swallowed it down, focusing on Nia instead. "You okay, baby girl?" she asked, her voice steady despite the heat creeping up her neck. Nia nodded, oblivious, her unicorn now perched on the tray table as she rummaged in Aisha's backpack for her coloring book. Aisha unzipped the pack, pulling out the dog-eared book and a pack of crayons, their tips worn from months of use. She handed them over, watching Nia flip to a page of butterflies, her little tongue poking out as she concentrated. The sight soothed Aisha's frayed nerves, a reminder of why she was here, why she'd fought so hard to scrape together this trip. She leaned back, the seat's thin cushion creaking under her weight, and let her eyes drift shut for a second. The plane wasn't full yet, but the air already felt thick with impatience, passengers cramming bags into bins and barking at each other over armrests. She tuned it out, focusing on the faint rumble of the engines warming up outside. This was it, their ticket out. Atlanta had chewed her up and spat her out, but Seattle promised a clean slate, a job where her voice might actually matter. Karen's voice cut through her thoughts again, sharp and clipped as she barked at a teenage boy a few rows ahead. "Feet off the seat now," she snapped, her tone dripping with authority. The kid complied, mumbling an apology, and Karen's heels clicked back down the aisle, her presence a storm cloud Aisha couldn't shake. She opened her eyes, catching Karen's silhouette against the galley light, and felt a prickle of unease. That muttered "charity cases" line wasn't random, it was a warning. A signal this woman saw Aisha as less than a problem to be managed. Aisha had dealt with her share of Karens over the years, the ones who clutched purses tighter when she walked by or questioned her every move at work. But something about this one felt heavier, more deliberate. She glanced around, clocking the cabin's mix of faces. A few passengers shot her quick, curious looks, their eyes darting away when she met them. Others ignored her entirely, lost in their headphones or magazines. An older black man with a gray beard and a faded army cap sat across the aisle, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp, like he'd seen this dance before. Aisha offered a small nod, and he tipped his head back, a silent acknowledgement that steadied her. She wasn't alone, not entirely, but the weight of Karen's disdain clung to her like damp clothes, a chill she couldn't shake. Nia scribbled, a purple wing on her butterfly, humming a tune Aisha didn't recognize, and Aisha forced her shoulders to loosen. Whatever Karen's deal was, she wouldn't let it ruin this. Not today. The plane's intercom crackled, the captain's voice, droning about weather and flight time, 5 hours and change to Seattle. Aisha adjusted Nia's seatbelt, her fingers brushing the girl's warm skin, and settled in as the engines roared to life. The cabin lights dimmed, and the plane lurched forward, taxiing toward the runway. Nia pressed her face to the window, gasping as the ground blurred past, and Aisha let herself hope just for a moment that the worst was behind them. Karen's shadow flickered at the edge of her vision, a reminder that hope was a fragile thing, but Aisha pushed it aside. They were airborne now, climbing into the sky, and she'd be damned if she let anyone drag her back down. Not yet. The plane sliced through the sky at 35,000 feet, a faint hum vibrating through the cabin as Aisha Monroe leaned back in her seat, her eyes half closed, savoring a rare moment of calm. Nia, nestled beside her in the window seat, giggled softly, her crayons scraping across the butterfly page in her coloring book, a splash of purple and yellow blooming under her tiny hands. The recycled air smelled faintly of stale coffee and jet fuel, but Aisha didn't mind. They were halfway to Seattle, halfway to a life that might finally give instead of take. She adjusted her position, the damp spot on her jeans from Nia's earlier water spill now a cold reminder of their rushed morning. Outside, clouds stretched endless and white, a cotton sea Nia kept pointing at with her glitter-dusted unicorn, whispering, "Mama, it's like magic." Aisha smiled, her chest loosening for the first time since they'd boarded. Maybe this flight really was their bridge to something better. Could a single trip rewrite years of struggle? Then it happened. Nia, caught up in her excitement, reached for her apple juice on the tray table, her small fingers fumbling the plastic cup. It tipped, spilling a golden cascade across the table and into Aisha's lap, soaking her jeans from thigh to knee. Nia's eyes widened, her mouth dropping into a perfect O of panic. "Oh no, Mama, I'm sorry," she squeaked, her voice trembling, as she scrambled to grab the cup, knocking it further. The juice pooled, dripping onto the floor, and Aisha's calm shattered. She snatched the few napkins stuffed in her backpack, blotting at the mess, her voice low and soothing despite the sudden spike in her pulse. "It's okay, baby girl, accidents happen. We'll clean it up, see?" Nia's lip quivered, tears welling, and Aisha pulled her close, rubbing her back, the unicorn now sticky in Nia's grip. Wasn't this just a bump, a small hiccup they could laugh about later? Not to Karen Whitlock. The flight attendant materialized like a thunderclap, her heels clicking down the aisle with predatory speed, her sharp features twisted into a scowl that could curdle milk. She stopped at their row, hands on hips, her navy blazer pristine against the chaos of Aisha's soaked lap. "Can't you control your kid?" she barked, her voice a whip crack that sliced through the cabin's hum, loud enough to jerk heads around. Passengers twisted in their seats, eyes darting from Karen to Aisha, some curious, others annoyed, a few already whispering. Aisha froze, napkins dripping in her hands, her breath catching as Karen loomed over them. "This isn't a daycare, you know," Karen snapped, her blue eyes glinting with something darker than irritation. "You're ruining the flight for decent folks who actually belong here." The words landed like fists, each one a calculated jab, and Aisha's stomach churned. Decent folks. Who did this woman think she was talking to? Aisha opened her mouth to respond, but Karen wasn't done. She leaned closer, her perfume a cloying wave of lavender, and pointed at the puddle on the floor. "Look at this mess. You think I've got time to mop up after people like you?" The "people like you" hung in the air, heavy with venom, and Aisha's blood turned to fire. She'd heard that tone before, the one that stripped her down, to her skin color and nothing else. But hearing it now in front of Nia lit a fuse she couldn't douse. She set the napkins down, her hands trembling, and met Karen's gaze, her voice steady despite the heat climbing her throat. "It was an accident. I'm handling it." Simple, calm, a shield against the storm. But Karen didn't back off. She snatched Nia's coloring book from the tray table, the butterflies fluttering as she flung it down the aisle, pages flapping like wounded birds. It skidded under a seat 5 rows back, and Nia gasped, her small body shrinking against Aisha. "Clean it up or I'll have you both removed," Karen hissed, her lips curling into a sneer that dared Aisha to push back. The cabin fell silent, the weight of dozens of eyes pressing down, a mix of shock and judgment thickening the air. A white guy in a baseball cap 2 rows ahead smirked, muttering, "Some people shouldn't fly," while a woman in a silk scarf beside him nodded, her lips pursed tight. Aisha's cheeks burned, humiliation clawing at her, but she locked it down, refusing to let Nia see her crack. She slid out of her seat, kneeling to sop up the juice with the last of her napkins, her soaked jeans sticking to her skin. Nia whimpered, clutching her unicorn, and Aisha whispered, "It's okay, baby, just stay there." Could she swallow this? Keep the peace for Nia's sake? Or was this the moment everything changed? Karen watched, arms crossed, her smirk growing as Aisha scrubbed the floor, the sticky liquid smearing under her fingers. But then she stepped closer, too close, and shoved Aisha's shoulder with her palm, a sharp jolt that sent Aisha rocking back on her heels. The contact was electric, a spark that blew the lid off Aisha's restraint. She shot up, her 5'6" frame taut with fury, her wet jeans clinging like a second skin. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice low and lethal, cutting through, the murmurs rippling around them. Karen flinched, just for a second, her eyes narrowing as if Aisha's defiance was a personal insult. The older black man across the aisle, the one with the army cap, shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening, but he didn't speak. Not yet. The guy in the polo shirt from boarding chuckled, a sound that grated like sandpaper, and Aisha felt the cabin tilt, the air crackling with something she couldn't name. Karen straightened, her smirk morphing into a mask of outrage. "You don't tell me what to do," she spat, her finger jabbing the air an inch from Aisha's face. "I'm in charge here, and you're lucky I don't toss you out at 35,000 feet." The threat was absurd, impossible, but the venom behind it was real. A promise of power flexed without mercy. Aisha's heart slammed against her ribs, her mind racing. Was this woman unhinged, or just so used to getting her way that she didn't care? Nia's soft sob pulled her back, and Aisha glanced at her daughter, her small face crumpled with fear, the unicorn trembling in her hands. That sight flipped a switch. Aisha squared her shoulders, her voice rising just enough to carry. "You're not tossing anyone anywhere. Back off." The words hung there, a gauntlet thrown, and the cabin buzzed with stifled gasps. Karen's face reddened, her composure cracking as she fumbled for the radio clipped to her belt. "Captain, we've got a disruptive passenger in 27C, she said, her tone clipped and triumphant, her eyes never leaving Aisha's. "She's causing a scene, refusing to comply." Aisha's stomach dropped, the word disruptive twisting like a knife. She wasn't the one spilling hate, but Karen's spin was already rewriting the story. The radio crackled, the captain's voice a distant rumble. "Handle it, Whitlock." Karen's smirk returned, a predator scenting blood, and Aisha realized this wasn't just a clash, it was a setup. What kind of power did this woman wield to turn a spill into a war? Hey folks, what do you think? Comment number 1 if you're raging at Karen's blatant racism. How can someone abuse their job like that? Drop a like if you're rooting for Aisha to fight back against this nonsense, and subscribe if you're ready to see justice served up hot. Has anyone faced a bully like Karen and turned the tables? Let's hear it below. Your stories fuel this fire. Now here's the big question. Will Aisha's stand against Karen spark a victory? Or has she just lit the fuse on a bomb she can't outrun? Stick around for part 4 to find out. Aisha Monroe stood in the cramped aisle of the plane, her soaked jeans clinging to her thighs, her pulse hammering as Karen Whitlock's radio crackled with the captain's terse reply. The flight attendant's smug grin widened, her fingers still, hovering over the device clipped to her pristine navy blazer, as if she'd already won. The cabin air buzzed with tension, a dozen pairs of eyes boring into Aisha from every angle, some wide with shock, others narrowed with disdain. Nia huddled in the window seat, her small frame curled around her unicorn, her soft whimpers slicing through Aisha's chest like shards of glass. Karen's shove still burned on her shoulder, a phantom sting that snapped something deep inside her. She'd swallowed venom before, let it pool in her gut for Nia's sake, but not this time. Not with her daughter watching, trembling, learning what it meant to be crushed under someone's boot. Aisha drew a jagged breath, her 5'6" silhouette rising like a wall against the storm. "You don't get to touch me or my daughter," she said, her voice a low, steady blade, cutting through the murmurs rippling across the cabin. The words weren't loud, but they carried sharp and unyielding, a line drawn in the sand at 35,000 feet. Karen's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat, her blue eyes flickering with something Aisha couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or the first flicker of doubt. The silence stretched, thick and electric as passengers shifted in their seats. The guy in the polo shirt from boarding leaning forward, his phone angled like he might record this. Aisha held Karen's gaze, her hands balling into fists at her sides, the damp napkin still clutched in one palm, dripping apple juice onto the carpet. She wasn't backing down, not after that shove, not after the venom Karen had spat in front of Nia. The flight attendant's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin, furious line. "You don't talk to me like that," she hissed, stepping closer, her heels sinking into the juice-stained floor. Her voice rose, a shrill edge cutting through the hum of the engines. "I'm in charge here, and you're nothing but trouble." She jabbed a manicured finger toward Aisha's chest, stopping an inch short, as if daring her to flinch. Aisha didn't. She squared her shoulders, her jaw tight, every muscle coiled with the fire she'd kept banked for too long. The cabin fell into a hush, the kind that swallows sound, leaving only the faint whine of the plane slicing through the clouds. Nia's sobs quieted to a hiccup, her wide eyes peeking over the unicorn, and Aisha felt a surge of resolve. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about showing Nia she didn't have to shrink. Karen fumbled with her radio again, her movements jerky, her composure fraying at the edges. "Captain, this passenger's disruptive," she said. Her tone clipped and dripping with triumph, her eyes locked on Aisha like a hunter sizing up prey. "She's refusing orders, causing a scene. I need backup." The radio buzzed, static crackling before the captain's voice rumbled through, distant and gruff. "Calm her down, Whitlock, or we'll deal with it on the ground." Karen's smirk returned, a slow, vicious curl, as if the captain's words were a blank check to bury Aisha. She clipped the radio back to her belt, crossing her arms, her stance wide like she owned the aisle. "You heard him," she said, her voice loud enough to carry to the back rows. "Sit down and behave, or you're done." Aisha's stomach twisted, the word disruptive echoing in her skull like a gavel. She wasn't the one hurling insults or shoving people, but Karen's spin was slick, twisting her defiance into a crime. Her mind raced, years of navigating bias flashing behind her eyes. Hospital admins who'd called her aggressive for asking questions, cops who'd eyed her like a suspect for walking home late. She knew this game, knew how fast it could flip, but she couldn't let it win. Not here. Not now. She took a step forward, closing the gap Karen had left, her voice rising just enough to match the flight attendant's. "You're the one causing a scene," she said, her words steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You threw my daughter's book. You pushed me. I'm not the problem here." A gasp rippled through the cabin, soft but sharp, like a pin dropping in a silent room. The guy in the baseball cap 2 rows up snorted, muttering, "Oh, she's asking for it," while the woman in the silk scarf beside him clutched her purse, tighter, her lips pursed in silent agreement. But not everyone stayed quiet. The older black man across the aisle, the one with the faded army cap and gray beard, leaned forward, his voice gravelly but firm. "She's right," he said, his eyes locked on Karen. "You're out of line, lady. Kid spilled something, that's all. Leave him alone." His name tag, barely visible under his jacket, read, Clarence, and his tone carried the weight of someone who'd faced down worse than a flight attendant's tantrum. Karen whirled on him, her face flushing a blotchy red. "Stay out of this, old man," she snapped, her finger now pointing at Clarence. "You want to join her? I'll report you too." Clarence didn't blink, his posture steady, but he raised his hand slightly, a gesture of peace that didn't match the steel in his gaze. "Go ahead," he said, his voice calm. "I've seen bullies like you before. Doesn't scare me." Aisha's chest swelled, a flicker of gratitude cutting through her fury. She wasn't alone, not entirely, and that steadied her. But Karen wasn't fazed. She turned back to Aisha, her smirk twisting into something feral. "You're both trouble," she said, loud enough for the whole plane to hear. "Sit down, or I'll make sure you regret it." Aisha's breath hitched, the threat sinking into her bones. Regret it? What did that even mean on a plane? Her mind spun, picturing Naya's terrified face, the hours still ahead, the landing in Seattle that suddenly felt a lifetime away. She could sit, let this blow over, keep Naya safe from whatever Karen had brewing. But the shove replayed in her head, the sting of Karen's palm, the casual cruelty in people like you. She glanced at Nia, her daughter's eyes glistening with unshed tears, and something snapped into place. If she sat now, Nia would learn to bow, to take it, to let people like Karen win. Aisha couldn't live with that. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins, and hit record, the red dot blinking to life. "I'm not sitting until you back off," she said, her voice ringing clear, the phone angled to catch Karen's face. "You've harassed us, touched me, threatened us. I'm done. This is going online and everyone's gonna see what you really are." The cabin erupted in whispers, a wave of shock rolling from row to row. The polo shirt guy groaned, "Here we go," while a teenage girl a few seats back gasped, her own phone slipping out to film. Clarence nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips, and Aisha felt a surge of power, raw and fleeting. She'd flipped the script, turned Karen's game against her. The flight attendant's eyes widened, her hand twitching toward the radio. But she froze, caught in the lens like a deer in headlights. "You can't do that," Karen sputtered, her voice pitching high, her authority crumbling. "Turn that off, or I'll—" She cut herself off, her gaze darting to the growing sea of phones now pointed her way. Aisha held steady, her arm unwavering, the wet jeans and sticky floor forgotten. "Or you'll what?" she pressed, her tone icy. "Call the captain again? Go ahead. Let's see how this plays out." Karen's mouth opened, then shut, her face a mask of rage and panic. The radio crackled again, unprompted, the captain's voice barking through. "Whitlock, what's the holdup? Calm it down now." The order was sharp, a lifeline Aisha seized. "You heard him," she said, echoing Karen's earlier taunt. "Calm it down." Karen's smirk vanished, replaced by a snarl as she stepped back, her heels clicking a retreat. "This isn't over," she muttered, her voice low but venomous, a promise that chilled Aisha's spine. She stormed toward the galley, her silhouette swallowed by the dim light, leaving Aisha standing in the aisle, phone still rolling, her breath ragged but triumphant. Naya peeked up, her tears drying, a flicker of awe in her eyes. "Mama, you're brave," she whispered, and Aisha's heart clenched. She slid back into her seat, shutting off the recording, her hands shaking as the adrenaline ebbed. The cabin buzzed, passengers whispering, some glaring, others nodding, but Aisha ignored them. She'd won this round. Or had she? Karen's parting shot echoed in her skull, a dark cloud on the horizon she couldn't outfly. The plane descended toward Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, its engines groaning as the cabin tilted, the sprawling Puget Sound shimmering below through Nia's window. Aisha Monroe sat rigid in her middle seat, her damp jeans now stiff and cold against her skin, her phone clutched tight in her lap. The recording she'd made of Karen Whitlock's tirade burned in her pocket, a small victory she clung to after their clash mid-flight. Nia dozed beside her, her head lolling against Aisha's arm, the unicorn tucked under her chin, its glitter dulled by sticky juice stains. The cabin buzzed with the rustle of passengers gathering bags, the tension from Aisha's stand against Karen simmering beneath the surface, a low hum of whispers and stolen glances. She'd held her ground, turned the tables, and for a moment she let herself believe the worst was over. The wheels hit the runway with a jolt, Nia stirring awake with a sleepy, "Are we there, Mama?" Aisha smoothed her daughter's curls, forcing a smile. "Yeah, baby girl, we made it." If only she knew how fragile that hope was. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and the aisle flooded with passengers, a chaotic shuffle of elbows and luggage. Aisha stood, her legs shaky from hours of sitting, and reached for the overhead bin, her duffel bag's frayed strap snagging as she tugged it free. Nia clung to her unicorn, rubbing her eyes, her yellow dress wrinkled but her spirit intact. Aisha guided her into the aisle, weaving past the polo shirt guy who shot her a sour look, his muttered troublemaker barely audible over the clamor. Clarence, the older man with the army cap, caught her eye as he stood, offering a nod that felt like a lifeline. "You did good up there," he said, his gravelly voice steady. Aisha managed a faint thanks, her chest tightening with gratitude, but her focus was on the exit. She just wanted off this plane, away from Karen's venom, into the fresh air of a new start. The jetway loomed ahead, a tunnel to freedom, or so she thought. They stepped into the gate area, the terminal's bright lights and bustling crowd a stark contrast to the plane's claustrophobic gloom. Aisha hoisted the duffel higher, her free hand gripping Nia's, when a wall of blue uniforms materialized. From the throng, 3 airport police officers, their faces hard and unreadable, cut through the passengers like sharks, their boots thudding on the tile. The lead cop, a burly man with a buzz cut and a badge reading Vance, zeroed in on Aisha, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. "Aisha Monroe?" he barked, his voice loud enough to turn heads. Her stomach plummeted, a cold sweat prickling her neck. "Yeah, that's me," she said, her tone wary, her grip on Nia tightening. Before she could ask why, Vance stepped closer, his bulk towering over her. "You're under arrest for assaulting a crew member. Hands where I can see 'em." The words hit like a freight train, knocking the breath from her lungs. Assault. Her mind reeled, flashing to Karen's shove, the recording, the standoff. She hadn't touched anyone. "What?" "That's a lie," she said, her voice rising, her hands lifting instinctively, palms out. Nia whimpered, pressing into Aisha's leg, and the crowd parted, travelers gawking as if this were some live drama unfolding for their entertainment. Vance didn't flinch. "Turn around now," he ordered, pulling handcuffs from his belt with a metallic clink. Aisha's heart jackhammered, panic clawing at her throat, but she caught sight of Karen emerging from the gate, her navy blazer pristine, her smirk a blade of triumph. Beside her stood a slick-suited man from first class, his tie loosened, his eyes cold as he nodded at Vance. Aisha's gut twisted. Karen had set this up, spun a story, and this guy was her backup. "I didn't assault anyone," Aisha said, her voice shaking but fierce, her eyes darting between Vance and Karen. "She pushed me. I've got proof on my phone." She reached for her pocket, but Vance lunged, grabbing her wrist and yanking it behind her back. Pain shot through her arm, and Nia screamed, "Mama!" her small hands clutching Aisha's jeans. "Stop it! You're hurting her!" The second cop, a wiry woman with a pinched face, stepped in, prying Nia away as the girl kicked and wailed, her unicorn dropping to the floor. Aisha twisted, desperation surging. "Don't touch her! She's 6, let her go!" But Vance snapped the cuffs on, the steel biting into her wrists, and shoved her toward the exit, his grip bruising. Karen sauntered closer, her heels clicking a slow, deliberate rhythm, her voice dripping with mock pity. "Should have known your place," she said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "You and that kid don't belong here." The words were a gut punch, raw and racial, stripping Aisha bare in front of strangers snapping photos, their phones glinting like vultures' eyes. Clarence pushed through, his cap askew, shouting, "This is wrong. She didn't do nothing." But the third cop, a stocky guy with a buzz cut, blocked him, barking, "Back off or you're next." Aisha's head spun, her pleas drowned by Naya's sobs as the wiry cop hauled her daughter toward a side door. "Where are you taking her?" Aisha yelled, her voice cracking, but Vance just smirked, mirroring Karen's glee. "Child services'll sort her out. You're done." They dragged her through the terminal, her sneakers squeaking on the tile, Nia's cries echoing behind her until a door slammed, cutting them off. Aisha's knees buckled, but Vance yanked her upright, shoving her into a dimly lit holding cell, tucked behind a security desk. The walls were gray concrete, the air thick with bleach and despair, a single bench bolted to the floor. Nia sat beside her, trembling, her face streaked with tears, her unicorn gone. Aisha dropped to her knees, pulling her daughter close despite the cuffs, her own eyes burning. "It's okay, baby girl. I'm here," she whispered, her voice raw, but the lie tasted bitter. Nothing was okay. Karen had turned a spill into a felony and the cops bought it, or didn't care. How deep did this go? Vance loomed outside the glass partition, his radio crackling as he muttered something to dispatch. Karen stood beside him, her smirk unwavering, chatting with the first-class man like this was a victory lap. Aisha's phone, her proof, was gone. Confiscated, when Vance patted her down, tossed into an evidence bag with a grunt. She'd tried to explain, begged them to listen, but they'd ignored her, their faces blank masks of authority. Her mind raced, piecing it together. Karen's lie, the slick guy's nod, the cop's eagerness. This wasn't random, it was orchestrated. A trap sprung the second the plane touched down. But they didn't know her, didn't know what she carried beyond that confiscated phone. Tucked in her sock, hidden under her jeans, was a burner phone. A cheap flip model she'd kept since her whistleblower days. A habit born of paranoia that might now save her. She shifted, shielding Nia as she slipped a hand down, her fingers brushing the plastic edge. Vance turned away, distracted by Karen's laughter, and Aisha flipped it open under her thigh, her movements slow and deliberate. She punched in Derek's number, her older brother, the one person who'd always had her back. A civil rights lawyer with a name that made racists sweat, he'd told her once. If you're ever in deep, I'll pull you out. She hit send, the text short and desperate. Arrested at SeaTac. Nia with me. Help. The screen blinked, message sent, and she snapped it shut, shoving it back into her sock as Vance glanced her way. Her heart thudded, hope flickering amid the dread. Derek would come. He had to. Karen tapped the glass, her voice muffled but cutting. Enjoy your new home, she said, her eyes glinting with malice. Should have kept quiet. She turned, her heels echoing as she strutted off. With Vance and the slick man, their silhouettes fading into the terminal's bustle, Aisha held Nia tighter, the girl's sobs softening into shudders, her small body warm against Aisha's chest. The cell's fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows, and Aisha's mind churned. She'd fought back, recorded the truth, and thought she'd won a sliver of power. Now she was cuffed, her daughter traumatized, her fresh start a distant dream. Karen's lie had teeth, backed by cops and a witness who'd sell his soul for a first-class seat. But Derek was coming, and with him, a storm Karen couldn't imagine. Aisha kissed Nia's forehead, whispering, "We're getting out, baby. I promise." The burner phone pressed against her ankle, a secret lifeline in a war she hadn't started but wouldn't lose. The holding cell at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport smelled of bleach and defeat, its gray walls pressing in on Aisha Monroe as she sat on the cold bench, her wrists still cuffed, her 6-year-old daughter Nia curled against her side. The Rixie, fluorescent light buzzed overhead, a relentless drone that matched the ache in Aisha's skull. Nia's breathing had steadied, her small face streaked with dried tears, her unicorn lost somewhere in the chaos of their arrest. Aisha's jeans, stiff with dried apple juice, chafed her thighs, but she barely noticed. Her focus was on the burner phone hidden in her sock, its silent promise of rescue the only thing keeping her from breaking. She'd texted Derek, her older brother, a civil rights lawyer with a reputation that could crack concrete. And now she waited, every tick of the clock a knife twist in her gut. Karen Whitlock's smirk lingered in her mind. That taunting, "should have known your place," echoing like a curse. Aisha stroked Nia's hair, whispering, "We're okay, baby girl." But the words felt hollow against the steel cuffs biting her skin. The terminal beyond the glass partition hummed with muffled noise, footsteps, voices, the occasional crackle of a radio. Aisha's eyes flicked to the door, her breath shallow, when it burst open with a bang that jolted Nia awake. Derek Monroe stormed in, a 6'3" tower of fury in a tailored black suit, his broad shoulders filling the frame. His shaved head gleamed under the lights, his dark eyes blazing as he swept the room, a legal team trailing behind him, like wolves on a hunt. 2 attorneys, a wiry woman with a tablet and a stocky man lugging a briefcase, flanked him, their faces set in grim determination. Derek's presence sucked the air out of the space, his deep voice booming as he slapped a stack of papers on the security desk. "I'm Derek Monroe, counsel for Aisha Monroe. Release her and her daughter now, or I'll have this airport in federal court by morning." Vance, the burly cop who'd cuffed Aisha, spun from his post, his hand twitching toward his holster. But Derek didn't blink. "You've got no grounds," he said, his tone a razor's edge. "False arrest, fabricated charges, racial profiling. I've got witnesses and a video that'll bury you." He flashed his bar association card, its gold seal catching the light, and Vance's smirk faded, his ruddy face paling as he fumbled for the radio. We got a lawyer here," he muttered, but Derek cut him off, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing the cop. "You don't need backup, you need keys. Uncuff my sister, or I'll sue you personally for every dime you've got." The Waysor, wiry woman cop, who'd hauled Nia earlier, scurried over, her pinched face tight with nerves as she unlocked Aisha's cuffs, the steel clattering to the bench. Aisha rubbed her wrists, red welts blooming where the metal had dug in, and pulled Nia into her lap, her daughter's small arms wrapping around her neck. "Uncle Derek," Nia squeaked, her voice shaky but bright, and Derek knelt, ruffling her pigtails with a gentleness that belied his storm. "Hey, little warrior," he said, his smile warm but his eyes still locked on Vance. "You're safe now." Aisha stood, her legs wobbly, and met Derek's gaze, relief crashing over her like a wave. "You got here fast," she said, her voice hoarse. He nodded, rising to his full height. "Caught a red eye when I got your text. No one messes with my family." The legal team moved in, the woman tapping furiously on her tablet, the man pulling files from his briefcase, and within 20 minutes they'd sprung Aisha and Nia, the cops muttering apologies as Derek's credentials made them sweat. They stepped into the terminal, the bustle of travelers a stark contrast to the cell's gloom. Aisha clutched Nia's hand, her duffel slung over her shoulder, the burner phone still pressed against her ankle. Derek walked beside her, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his stride purposeful as he led them toward the exit. "We're getting you to a hotel," he said, his voice low. "Then we figure out how deep this goes." Aisha nodded, her chest loosening for the first time since the spill, thinking she'd dodged the bullet. Karen's lie had crumbled under Derek's weight, and the cops had backed off. Surely that was the end of it. She let herself breathe, Nia's small hand warm in hers, the promise of a shower and a bed lulling her into fragile hope. But Karen wasn't done. An hour later, as Aisha unpacked in a modest hotel room 10 miles from the airport, her phone, the real one, returned with her belongings, buzzed with a notification. She opened it, expecting a text from Derek, who'd stepped out to make calls, but instead saw an email from the airline. "Due to a formal complaint filed by crew member Karen Whitlock," it read, "alleging you threatened her life during flight ATLC, your return travel privileges are suspended indefinitely pending investigation." Aisha's stomach dropped, her hands trembling as she scrolled. Threatened her life? The lie was outrageous, a grotesque twist of their clash. But attached was a grainy security clip, doctored, clearly, showing Aisha lunging at Karen mid-flight, her arm outstretched, as if to strike. The timestamp matched her recording, but the angle hid Karen's shove, painting Aisha as the aggressor. Nia played on the floor, stacking hotel pillows into a fort, oblivious to the storm brewing in Aisha's chest. She reread the email, her mind racing. This wasn't just revenge. It was a calculated strike to strand her in Seattle, cut her off from home, from the job she'd fought for. Derek burst back in, his phone pressed to his ear, his face darkening as he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, ending his call mid-sentence. She handed him the phone, her voice barely a whisper. "They're saying I threatened her. They faked it, Derek. I'm stuck here." He scanned the screen, his jaw tightening, a vein pulsing in his neck. "They're playing dirty," he said, his tone lethal. "This is bigger than one flight. Attendant." He stepped to the window, peering through the blinds at the parking lot below, his posture tense. Aisha followed his gaze, catching a flicker of movement. A woman in a navy blazer, Karen, leaning against a car, her blonde bun glinting under a streetlight. She held a phone to her ear, her lips moving fast, her smirk visible even from 3 stories up. Derek's eyes narrowed. "She's not alone," he muttered, pulling his own phone back out. "That call she's making, it's not random." Aisha's pulse spiked, the hotel room shrinking around her. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant, she had backup, a network that could forge footage, sway Airlines, and keep her one step ahead. Derek dialed his team, his voice sharp. Get me everything on Whitlock. Contacts, history, now. Aisha sank onto the bed, Nia climbing into her lap, sensing the shift. Mama, are we staying here? She asked, her voice small. Aisha forced a smile, kissing her forehead. For now, baby girl. But her mind churned, the suspension a shackle tighter than the cuffs. She'd thought Derek's arrival was her win, her escape from Karen's trap. But this was a counterattack, swift and brutal, locking her in a city she couldn't leave. Karen's smirk outside wasn't just gloating, it was a promise of more to come, a shadow stretching far beyond. The plane. Aisha hugged Nia tighter, her resolve hardening. Derek would fight and so would she, but the ground beneath them was crumbling fast. Hey folks, what's your take on this? Comment number 1 if you think Karen's gone too far with this fake footage. How low can she sink? Hit like if you're cheering for Derek to crush her game, and subscribe if you're hooked on seeing Aisha rise above this mess. Ever had someone twist the truth to trap you? Spill it below. Your stories keep this rolling. Now buckle up. Will Karen's next move break Aisha for good? Or has she just unleashed a firestorm she can't control? Part 7's coming and it's gonna blow your mind. Aisha Monroe sat on the edge of the hotel bed, her hands clasped tight around a lukewarm cup of coffee, the bitter taste grounding her as the Seattle night pressed against the window. Nia slept beside her, sprawled across the stiff mattress, her small chest rising and falling under a thin blanket, her pigtails fanned out like a halo. The room smelled faintly of bleach and stale air, a far cry from the fresh start Aisha had envisioned when they'd boarded that plane in Atlanta. Her real phone, returned after Derek's intervention, buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, the airline suspension email still open. Its words threatened her life, searing her brain. The doctored footage of her lunging at Karen, Whitlock looped in her mind, a lie so bold it stole her breath. Derek paced the cramped space, his tailored suit rumpled from hours of strategizing, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders to his legal team. Upload it now, he said, his deep voice a growl. Every platform full blast. Let's see how they spin this. Aisha's stomach churned, a mix of dread and hope twisting inside her. The recording she'd made mid-flight, Karen's venomous rant, the shove, the threats, was their ace, a raw slice of truth against the flight attendant's fabricated assault charge. Derek had retrieved it from her confiscated phone, a copy already backed up by his team, and now he was unleashing it on the world. He ended the call, turning to her with a grim nod. It's live, he said, pocketing his phone. Twitter, YouTube, everywhere. Millions will see it by morning. Aisha exhaled, her shoulders loosening for the first time since the cuffs. You sure this'll work? She asked, her voice low, not wanting to wake Nia. Derek's eyes softened, but his jaw stayed tight. It's not just working, Aisha. It's war now. He wasn't wrong. By dawn, the video exploded online, a viral wildfire that scorched the internet. Aisha watched it spread from Derek's laptop, propped on the hotel desk, the grainy footage playing on loop. Karen's shrill, "Can't you control your kid?" Her snatch of Nia's coloring book, the shove that rocked Aisha back. The comments flooded in, thousands morphing into millions, hashtags like Donder Justice for Aisha and Karen on flight trending worldwide. This is disgusting, one user wrote. Airline needs to fire her yesterday. Another, that's a mom and kid. How's this okay? Aisha's chest swelled, a flicker of vindication warming her as strangers rallied, their outrage a shield against the humiliation Karen had heaped on her. She scrolled, Nia still asleep, oblivious to the storm her spilled juice had ignited. For a moment, Aisha believed the tide had turned, that this flood of support would drown Karen's lies. Derek's team tracked the numbers, the wiry woman, Lena, tapping, her tablet with a faint smile. 10 million views in 6 hours, she said, glancing at Aisha. You're a symbol now. The stocky man, Jamal, nodded, his briefcase open with legal drafts spilling out. Airline's PR's scrambling, they can't ignore this. Aisha leaned back, the coffee cooling in her hands, her mind spinning. A symbol? She just wanted to get to Seattle, start her job, give Nia a shot at something better. Now she was a hashtag, a face on screens across the globe. She thought of Clarence, the army vet who'd backed her up, and wished he could see this. Maybe he was out there, nodding at his TV, proud she'd fought back. She let herself hope, just for a second, that this was her win, that Karen's smug grin would fade under the weight of millions calling her out. Then the counterattack hit, fast and brutal, a sledgehammer to her fragile victory. By noon, Aisha's phone pinged with a new alert, a headline from a sleazy tabloid. Flight menace exposed, violent agitator terrorizes passengers. Her breath caught, her fingers fumbling as she opened it. The story was a twisted mirror of the truth, claiming she'd attacked Karen unprovoked, a history of instability, making her a danger. Photos of her and Nia from the arrest. Splashed across the page her address, the hotel's exact location, plastered in bold. Aisha's blood ran cold, her eyes darting to the window, the blinds still cracked from Derek's earlier peek. "They doxed us," she whispered, handing the phone to Derek, her voice trembling. He scanned it, his face darkening, a vein pulsing in his temple. "This isn't random," he said, his tone lethal. "This is coordinated." The tabloid wasn't alone. Within hours, a swarm of hate sites picked up the story, amplifying the smear. "Welfare queen causes chaos," one screamed. "Deport her," another demanded, though Aisha was born in Georgia, as American as apple pie. Her social media flooded with vitriol, slurs, threats, photoshopped images of her in chains. Derek's team traced the source, Lena's fingers flying across her tablet. "Ex-cops," she said, her voice tight. "Airline execs with badges. In their past, they're Karen's crew." Jamal pulled a file, his brow furrowing. "They've got muscle, private security ties. This is a network." Aisha's stomach twisted, the room shrinking as the scope sank in. Karen wasn't just a racist flight attendant. She was a cog in something bigger, uglier, with hands deep in dirty pockets. Derek stepped to the window again, peering through the slats, his posture rigid. "They're fast," he muttered, his eyes scanning the parking lot. Aisha joined him, Nia stirring behind them, and her heart stopped. A pickup truck idled below, its tinted windows glinting under the streetlights, two shadowy figures inside. Before she could speak, a brick crashed through the glass, shattering the quiet, the jagged chunk skidding across the carpet. Nia jolted awake, screaming, and Aisha dove to shield her, her arms wrapping tight as glass sprayed the room. Derek lunged for the brick, snatching a crumpled note taped to it. "Leave or die," scrawled in black marker, the letters sharp and jagged. Aisha's pulse roared, her breath shallow as she clutched Nia, the girl's sobs muffled against her chest. "Get down," Derek barked, shoving the laptop shut and herding them to the bathroom, the only space without windows. Aisha stumbled, Nia in her arms, her duffel dragged behind her, the coffee cup spilling across the bed. The bathroom's tile was cold under her knees, the door slamming shut as Derek braced it, his phone already dialing 911. "Armed threat at the Rainier Inn," he snapped, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Get here now." Aisha rocked, Nia whispering, "It's okay, baby, we're safe." But her own fear clawed at her throat. The brick wasn't a warning, it was a declaration. Karen's allies weren't just smearing her. They were hunting her, turning her viral win into a death sentence. Derek peeked through the door crack, his jaw tight. "Cops will be here in 5, he said. But his eyes betrayed the truth. 5 minutes was a lifetime when glass was breaking. Aisha's mind raced, the doxing, the truck, the note snapping into place. This was retaliation, pure and vicious. Karen's network flexing muscle to crush her before the video's momentum grew. She thought of the millions cheering her online, their voices drowned by this real-world terror. Her hotel address out there meant nowhere was safe. Not this room, not Seattle. She'd wanted justice, not a target on her back, but Karen's crew didn't care. They'd burn her life down to protect their own. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing, and Derek eased the door open, his posture easing slightly. "They're coming," he said. But Aisha didn't relax. Naya clung to her, her small body shaking, and Aisha's resolve hardened amid the fear. The video had lit a fire, but it had also painted her as prey for monsters with deeper claws than she'd imagined. Derek knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "We're not stopping," he said. "This is their mistake. They just showed their hand." Aisha nodded, her eyes burning with unshed tears, the note's threat seared into her skull. She'd thought the world's outrage was her shield, but it had turned into a spotlight, drawing bloodthirsty shadows she couldn't outrun. Not yet. The cops arrived, their boots thudding outside, voices barking orders as the truck's engine roared away. Aisha held Nia tighter, the sirens a hollow comfort. Karen's smirk from the parking lot flashed in her mind, a promise of worse to come. The media firestorm had given her a voice, but it had also unleashed a beast, one that wouldn't stop until she was silenced. Derek's war was just beginning, and Aisha knew she'd have to fight too, harder than ever if they were going to survive this night and the ones ahead. Aisha Monroe sat on the bathroom floor of the Rainier Inn, her back pressed against the chipped tile, Naya trembling in her lap as the distant wail of sirens faded into the Seattle night. Glass shards glittered on the carpet beyond the door, the brick with its scrawled "Leave or Die" note lying where Derek had dropped it. Her brother crouched beside her, his tailored suit dusted with debris, his dark eyes blazing with a fury she hadn't seen since their childhood fights against neighborhood bullies. The cops had swept through, taken statements, and hauled the brick away in an evidence bag, but their shrugs and muttered, "We'll look into it," left Aisha hollow. The hotel room, her fragile sanctuary, was a crime scene now, its broken window letting in a damp breeze that smelled of rain and exhaust. Derek's hand rested on her shoulder, steadying her as he whispered, "They're not getting away with this, Aisha. We're hitting back hard." By morning, he'd made good on that promise. Derek relocated them to a new hotel across town, a nondescript chain with thicker walls and a security guard who barely glanced up from his phone. Aisha unpacked her duffel again, Nia clinging to her side, her small hands clutching a pillow she'd salvaged from the chaos. Derek's legal team descended, Lena and Jamal setting up a war room in the suite's cramped living area, laptops humming as they drafted a blockbuster lawsuit. $10 million, Derek said, pacing as he outlined it to Aisha, his voice a controlled storm. "Racial profiling, defamation, emotional distress. We're suing the airline and Whitlock personally. This ends in court." Aisha nodded, her throat tight, the weight of the brick still pressing on her chest. 10 million was a number she couldn't fathom, but it wasn't about money. It was about making them bleed for what they'd done. The filing hit the federal courthouse in Seattle by noon, a legal bomb that detonated across news feeds still buzzing from Aisha's viral video. Derek's name carried weight. Monroe v. Pacific Sky Airlines wasn't just a case, it was a reckoning. A civil rights titan taking on a corporate giant and its racist foot soldier. Aisha testified 2 days later, her voice shaking but fierce in a packed courtroom, the wooden benches creaking under the crush of reporters and onlookers. She wore a borrowed blazer from Lena, its stiff fabric a shield against the judges, stern gaze and the airline's slick defense lawyer, a rail-thin man with a perpetual smirk. "She humiliated me," Aisha said, her hands clasped tight on the stand, recounting the spill, the shove, the arrest. "She called us trouble, said we didn't belong, set me up to be cuffed in front of my daughter." Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not there. Not with Nia's face in her mind. Derek stood beside her, his presence a wall, tearing into the airline's policies with surgical precision. "This isn't one bad apple," he argued, his deep voice filling the room. "It's a system that empowers bigots like Karen Whitlock to terrorize passengers based on race." The judge, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward, her pen scratching notes as Aisha's recording played, Karen's venom echoing off the walls. Gasps rippled through the gallery, the first-class man who'd backed Karen shifting, uncomfortably in his seat, subpoenaed as a witness. The defense stammered, claiming exaggeration, but the judge cut them off, her gavel a sharp crack. "This moves forward," she ruled, fast-tracking the trial to the next week. Aisha exhaled, her knees weak as Derek guided her out, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "We've got him," he said, and for the first time since Atlanta, she believed it, her biggest win yet. But victory was a mirage, shattered hours later by a blow so ruthless it left her reeling. As Aisha and Derek left the courthouse, the Seattle sky gray with drizzle, her phone buzzed with a fresh alert. Another tabloid hit, this one worse. Flight mom's mental breakdown, unfit parent exposed. Her breath caught, her fingers fumbling as she opened it. The story claimed she'd been institutionalized years ago, a lie stitched from thin air, complete with forged medical records, alleging violent outbursts and delusions. Her mugshot from the arrest glared back at her, captioned with venom. A danger to her child and society. Aisha's stomach lurched, her vision blurring as she handed the phone to Derek. "They're making this up," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've never—" He scanned it, his jaw clenching so hard she thought his teeth might crack. "Bribery," he said, his tone lethal. "They got to a juror." Lena confirmed it minutes later, bursting into their hotel suite with her tablet, her wiry frame taut with urgency. "Juror 3, she said, tapping the screen. "Exchanged texts with an airline exec last night. Caught on a burner trace. He leaked this garbage." Jamal dug through his briefcase, pulling a dossier. "Exec's an old cop buddy of Whitlock's. They're doubling down." Aisha sank onto the couch, Nia coloring quietly beside her, oblivious to the storm. The smear wasn't just words. It was a blade aimed at her core, painting her as a lunatic to discredit her case. The fallout hit fast. By dusk, protesters swarmed the hotel's parking lot, a mob of 30 or 40, their voices a guttural roar piercing the walls. "Lock her up!" they chanted, waving signs scrawled with slurs, vicious, racial, personal. Aisha peeked through, the blinds, her heart pounding as she saw their faces red with rage, some wearing trucker hats, others clutching beer cans. Derek yanked her back, his voice sharp. "Stay away from there." But the noise grew, a rhythmic thud joining the shouts, and then a crash. A Molotov cocktail smashed against the building's brick facade, flames licking up the wall 10 feet from their window. Nia screamed, dropping her crayons, and Aisha scooped her up, bolting for the bathroom again, her pulse a deafening drumbeat. Derek followed, slamming the door as smoke seeped under it, the fire alarm blaring a shrill wail. "Get low," he ordered, shoving towels against the gap, his suit jacket discarded on the tile. Aisha crouched with Nia, the girl's sobs choking, her own breath, the heat pressing through the walls. "Mama, it's hot," Nia wailed, and Aisha clutched her tighter, whispering, "We're okay, baby. Just hold on." Sirens screamed outside, fire trucks rolling in, but the mob's chants didn't fade. They grew, a feral howl of hate fueled by Karen's lies. Derek dialed 911 again, his voice steady but strained. "Firebomb at the Meridian Suites, 2nd floor. We're trapped. Move fast." Aisha's mind spun. The forged records, the juror, the flames snapping into a horrifying puzzle. This wasn't just retaliation. It was war. Karen's crew willing to burn her alive to kill her story. The sprinklers kicked on, drenching them in icy water, the smoke thickening as firefighters battered the door. Derek braced it, his shoulders straining, until a gloved hand punched through, pulling them into the hall. Aisha stumbled out, Nia in her arms, her soaked clothes clinging as they raced down the stairwell, the air thick with ash. Outside, the mob scattered, cops shoving a few into paddy wagons, but the damage was done. The hotel's facade smoldered, a blackened scar where the bottle had hit. Aisha stood in the parking lot, shivering, Nia's wet face buried in her shoulder, the night air biting her skin. Derek loomed beside her, his suit drenched, his eyes scanning the chaos. "They're desperate," he said, his voice low. "That juror's toast. We've got the texts. But this?" He gestured at the fire, the fleeing protesters. "This is next level." Aisha nodded, her throat raw from smoke and fear. The lawsuit had felt like a triumph, the judge's ruling a lifeline, but Karen's allies had turned it into a nightmare, their claws sharper than she'd imagined. The tabloid lie wasn't just slander. It was a spark, igniting a mob that nearly torched her and Nia alive. She thought of the courtroom, her testimony, the millions online cheering her on. And now this. Flames licking at her heels, her sanity questioned, her life on the line. Derek's hand gripped her arm, steadying her as firefighters doused the last embers. "We're moving again," he said. "Somewhere they can't find us." Then we hit harder. Aisha met his gaze, her resolve steeling despite the terror. She'd won in court, or so she thought. But this was a counterattack she hadn't seen coming, a beast with teeth bared and no mercy left. The trial loomed, but survival came first, if they could make it that far. Aisha Monroe stood in the parking lot of the smoldering Meridian Suites, her wet clothes clinging to her skin, Naya shivering in her arms as the last embers flickered out under the firefighters' hoses. The Seattle night was thick with the scent of smoke and rain, the mob's chants still echoing in her skull, their Molotov cocktail a charred scar on the hotel's brick wall. Derek loomed beside her, his drenched suit clinging to his broad frame, his dark eyes scanning the chaos as cops hauled stragglers away. The lawsuit had felt like a lifeline, a $10 million hammer to smash Karen Whitlock's lies. But now it was a target, drawing bloodthirsty shadows that wouldn't stop at slander. Aisha's hands trembled, the forged mental breakdown, records and the firebomb twisting in her gut like a knife. She'd thought the courtroom was her battleground, but this war was spilling into the streets, and Nia's safety hung by a thread. Derek moved them again by dawn, this time to a safe house on the city's edge. A squat brick building tucked behind a row of pines, its windows barred and its address scrubbed from every map. Aisha unpacked her duffel for the third time in days, Nia clinging to her side, her small voice muted since the fire. "Mama, are we hiding?" she asked, clutching a pillow from the hotel, the only toy she had left. Aisha knelt, forcing a smile through the ache in her chest. "Just for a little while, baby girl. Uncle Derek's keeping us safe." But her eyes flicked to the barred windows, the weight of the brick's leave or die note pressing down. Derek's team swept in, Lena and Jamal setting up laptops, their faces grim as they tracked the jurors' texts, proof of bribery that could flip the case. "We've got him," Lena said, her wiry frame taut. "He's done." Aisha couldn't sit still, the fire's heat still licking her memory. She needed to fight, not just hide. "We've got the video. The world's on our side," she said to Derek, her voice raw but firm. "Let's use it." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Press, conference, today. You take back the narrative." By noon, they'd rallied allies. Clarence, the Army vet from the flight, tracked down through a mutual friend, a local activist named Marla, her braids swinging as she organized a crowd, and a dozen supporters who'd seen Aisha's story online. They gathered in a community center's cramped auditorium, its wooden floor scuffed, its walls plastered with flyers for justice marches. Aisha stood at a podium, Nia beside her clutching her hand, the room packed with 50 faces, some familiar, most strangers turned warriors by her viral truth. She gripped the mic, her borrowed blazer stiff against her shoulders, her voice trembling at first, but growing steady. "They tried to burn us out last night," she said, the words cutting through the hum of murmurs. "Called me crazy, said I don't belong. But I'm here, and I'm not shutting up." The crowd erupted, cheers shaking the rafters. Clarence, in the front row clapping with a proud nod. Marla stepped up, her voice a megaphone. "This ain't just Aisha's fight, it's ours. Airlines can't treat us like trash." Phones flashed, live streams buzzing as Aisha's defiance spread anew, her words a spark reigniting the odd justice for Aisha fire. She felt it, the surge of power, the room's energy lifting her from the ashes of the hotel. Victory seemed close, a tide she could ride to crush Karen's lies once and for all. Then the betrayal struck, a gut punch so swift it left her gasping. Hours after the conference, as Aisha and Nia returned to the safe house under Derek's watchful eye, sirens screamed through the pines. 4 cop cars screeched into the lot, lights flashing, doors slamming as officers swarmed, guns drawn. Officer Vance, the burly cop from the airport, led the charge, his buzz cut glinting under the sun, his smirk a mirror of Karen's. "Aisha, Monroe, you're under arrest!" he bellowed, his hand on his holster as he advanced. Possession with intent to distribute. Aisha froze, Nia clinging to her leg, her mind blank. What? She choked, her voice a rasp. I don't even… But Vance cut her off, yanking a baggie of white powder from his pocket, holding it up like a trophy. Found this in your room, he said, his tone dripping with glee. Derek lunged forward, his suit jacket flapping, his voice a roar. That's planted. You've got no warrant. But Vance shoved him back, two cops pinning him as a third ripped Nia from Aisha's arms. Mama! Nia screamed, her small body thrashing as a social worker in a gray coat materialized, dragging her toward a van. Aisha's world tilted, her knees buckling as Vance cuffed her again, the steel colder than before, biting deeper. You're not taking her, she yelled, twisting against the grip, but the cop's elbow slammed into her ribs, knocking the wind from her lungs. Clarence barreled from the safe house door, his army cap askew, shouting, "This is a setup!" But a baton cracked his shoulder, dropping him to the gravel. They hauled Aisha to a squad car, her breath ragged, Nia's cries fading as the van peeled away. Vance leaned close, his breath hot on her ear. Should have stayed quiet, he sneered, slamming the door. She glimpsed Karen through the window, perched in a black sedan across the lot, her blonde bun pristine, her smirk a dagger. The safe house raid wasn't random. Vance was her cousin, a fact Lena confirmed later, her tablet trembling in her hands as she showed Derek the link. Family ties, she said, her voice tight. He's been in her pocket for years. Aisha's head spun, the baggie a lie so bold it defied reason, but the cops didn't care. They had her and Nia was gone, ripped away to CPS, a wound deeper than any fire. Karen wasn't finished. Hours later, locked in a precinct cell, Aisha sat on a metal bench, her ribs aching, her mind a storm of Nia's screams. The door clanged open, and Karen strutted in, her navy blazer swapped for a crisp blouse, her heels clicking a victory march. "You'll rot here," she said, her voice low and venomous, her blue eyes glinting with hate. "Drop the suit or your brat's gone for good." Aisha surged to her feet, the cuffs rattling, her voice a snarl. "You won't win this." Karen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I already have," she said, turning away, her smirk a promise of more pain. The door slammed, leaving Aisha alone, the cell's walls closing in, Nia's absence a void she couldn't bear. Derek worked outside, his team scrambling to expose Vance's corruption, but the clock ticked mercilessly. Aisha's press conference had rallied the world, her voice echoing through live streams, but Karen's crew had turned it against her, planting drugs, stealing her daughter, pressing the DA to bury her under felony charges. The network wasn't just powerful, it was personal. Vance's blood tie to Karen a thread in a web that stretched beyond the airline, beyond reason. Aisha sank back, her hands shaking. The safe house's barred windows now a mocking memory. She'd thought she'd reclaimed her story, but this was a betrayal that cut to her core. A trap sprung when she dared to stand tall. Nia's face haunted her, and she vowed, silent and fierce, to fight through this hell, if she could survive it. Hey folks, what's your gut saying? Comment number 1 if you're furious at Vance planting that evidence. How dirty can these cops get? Drop a like if you're rooting for Aisha to claw her way out of this nightmare, and subscribe if you're locked in to see Karen's empire crumble. Ever had trust shattered like Aisha's when she lost Nia? Share your stories below. They fuel this fight. Now hold tight. Can Derek turn this setup into a knockout punch, or has Karen's family web snared them for good? Part 10's coming, and it's gonna hit like a freight train. Aisha Monroe sat shackled in the precinct cell, her wrists raw from the cuffs, her ribs throbbing where Officer Vance's elbow had slammed her during the arrest. The concrete walls loomed, cold and unyielding, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, buzzing overhead like a swarm of flies. Nia's screams echoed in her skull, her daughter's terrified face as CPS dragged her away, a wound that bled fresh with every breath. Karen Whitlock's parting taunt, "You'll rot here," rang in her ears, a venomous promise backed by the planted drugs and Vance's smug grin. Aisha's borrowed blazer hung damp and crumpled on her shoulders, the safe house rally's triumph now a distant memory swallowed by this nightmare. She pressed her forehead to her knees, her hands trembling, the precinct's stale air thick with despair. But Derek was out there, her rock, her fighter, and she clung to that shred of hope, a lifeline in the dark. Outside, Derek Monroe moved like a hurricane, his tailored suit traded for a black hoodie, his legal team a shadow army working the seams of Seattle's underbelly. He'd spent hours in a dingy diner across from the precinct, Lena's tablet glowing as she hacked into Vance's burner phone logs, Jamal poring over precinct records for a crack in the wall. "Got it," Lena whispered, her wiry fingers freezing. On the screen, emails. Vance to Karen. Timestamps from yesterday. He bragged about the plant. Derek's jaw tightened, his dark eyes glinting with fury. "That's our lever," he said, his voice a low growl. "Expose him, Spring. Her." Jamal pulled a USB drive, his stocky frame tense. "I've got the DA's ear. Old favor. We can push this." Derek nodded, his plan snapping into place. A breakout fueled by truth and grit. By midnight, the precinct's front desk buzzed with chaos. Derek stormed in, flanked by Lena and Jamal, slamming the hacked emails on the counter, his bar association card gleaming under the lights. "Officer Vance framed my sister," he roared, his 6'3" frame towering over the startled desk sergeant. "Federal corruption. Read it and weep." The sergeant, a balding man with a coffee-stained tie, fumbled the papers, his eyes widening as Lena played the audio on her tablet. Vance's voice, cocky and clear. "Planted the stash. She's..." "Done." Derek leaned in, his voice a blade. "Release Aisha Monroe now or this hits every newsroom in the state." The sergeant stammered, radioing the captain, and within 30 minutes, the cell door clanged open, a sheepish guard uncuffing Aisha with a muttered, "You're on bail." Aisha stumbled out, her legs shaky, her ribs screaming as she threw herself into Derek's arms, his hoodie rough against her cheek. "You did it," she rasped, tears burning her eyes. He held her tight, his voice steady. "Not done yet. Nia's next." They raced to the safe house, Aisha's heart pounding as CPS's van loomed in her mind. She thought she'd dodged the bullet, Vance's corruption exposed, her freedom reclaimed, until dawn broke and hell roared back. A text pinged her burner phone, anonymous but chilling. "Drop the suit, or she's gone." Aisha's blood froze, her hands fumbling, as she showed Derek. "They've got Nia," she whispered, her voice cracking. He cursed, dialing Lena, but Jamal burst in, his face pale. "Playground raid. Witness saw a girl snatched, matches Nia's dress." Aisha's world collapsed, her breath a jagged gasp as she pictured Nia's yellow dress, her pigtails, her terrified eyes. Derek grabbed his keys, his voice a snarl. "Warehouse district. Karen's crew runs there. We're going." Aisha nodded, her fear morphing into rage, and called Clarence, the army vet, his gravelly voice a lifeline on the burner. "Need you," she said, and he was there in 20, his cap low, his limp barely slowing him. They piled into Derek's SUV, tearing through Seattle's rain-slick streets, the pines blurring past as Aisha's mind raced. The safe house rally, the lawsuit, her stand, all had painted this target. And now Nia paid the price. She gripped the door, her nails digging into the leather, every mile a prayer. The warehouse loomed on the waterfront, a rusted hulk squatting under a gray sky, its windows boarded, its lot strewn with broken pallets. Derek parked a block away, his eyes scanning the shadows. "2 guards, east side," Clarence muttered, his vet instincts sharp, pointing to silhouettes by a loading dock. Aisha's pulse thundered, her ribs aching as she slipped out, Clarence at her side, his hand steadying her. "I'll distract," he said, limping toward the guards, his voice booming. "Hey, lost my way, help an old man?" They turned, grumbling, and Aisha darted past, her sneakers silent on the wet asphalt. Slipping through a side door Derek pried open with a crowbar. Inside, the air stank of oil and mildew, the cavernous space lit by flickering bulbs dangling from the ceiling. Crates loomed like tombstones, and Aisha crept through, her breath shallow, every creak a jolt to her spine. Then she heard it, Nia's whimper, soft but piercing, from a back room. She bolted, her ribs screaming, and found her daughter tied to a chair, her yellow dress torn, her pigtails askew, a gag biting into her mouth. Two thugs loomed, one wiry with a scarred face, the other hulking with a shaved head, their voices low as they argued over a phone. "Whitlock says hold her," the wiry one snapped. But Aisha didn't wait. She grabbed a wrench from a crate, her hand steady despite the pain, and swung, cracking the wiry one's skull. He dropped, a groan escaping, and the Hulk lunged, his fist grazing her jaw. She ducked, adrenaline surging, and kicked his knee, the crunch echoing as he staggered. Derek burst in, his crowbar smashing the Hulk's arm, sending him crashing into a stack of boxes. Aisha ripped the gag from Nia's mouth, her daughter's sobs breaking free as she untied her, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Mama, I was scared," Nia cried, her small body trembling, and Aisha kissed her forehead, tears streaming. "I've got you, baby girl." Clarence hobbled in, his cap gone, blood trickling from a split lip. The guards had roughed him up, but he'd held them off. Derek yanked the wiry thug up, his voice a snarl. "Who sent you?" The man spat, silent, and Derek dropped him, his eyes meeting Aisha's. "We're out." They fled, Aisha cradling Nia, her legs burning as they piled into the SUV, tires squealing as Derek gunned it. The warehouse shrank in the rear view, a hulking shadow against the dawn, and Aisha held Nia tight, her daughter's warmth a balm to her shredded nerves. She'd outsmarted them, rescued her girl, her ribs a dull ache beneath the triumph. They dodged the bullet. Karen's crew had lost this round. Or so she thought. As they sped through the pines, a loudspeaker crackled from nowhere, Karen's, voice slicing the air, cold and venomous. "This ends when you're dead." Aisha's blood chilled, her eyes darting to Derek, his knuckles white on the wheel. The sound came from a drone hovering above, its red light blinking like an eye, tracking them through the trees. Aisha's breath caught, Nia whimpering in, her lap as the drone's hum followed, relentless. "She's watching," Derek muttered, swerving onto a side road, the pines swallowing them deeper. Clarence leaned forward, his voice steady despite the blood on his chin. "She's got tech, means money, means power." Aisha's mind raced. The ransom note, the warehouse. Now this. Karen's network wasn't just muscle, it was a machine, and she'd underestimated its reach. The rescue had been a win, a heart-stopping snatch from their claws, but Karen's voice was a death vow, a promise that no safe house, no escape, would shield them. Aisha clutched Nia tighter, her resolve steeling amid the fear. She'd saved her daughter, but the war had just turned lethal, and Karen wasn't playing anymore. She was hunting. Derek floored it, the drone's hum fading as they plunged into the forest, but Aisha knew it wasn't gone, just waiting. The trial loomed, the lawsuit her last stand, but this was survival now, a race against a predator who'd stop at nothing. Nia's small hand gripped hers, her voice a whisper. "Mama, are we safe?" Aisha swallowed, her throat raw, and lied. "Yeah, baby, we're safe." But her eyes met Derek's in the mirror, his grim nod a silent pact. They'd fight, they'd run, they'd win, or they'd die trying. Karen's threat hung over them, a noose tightening with every mile, and Aisha braced for the next blow, knowing it'd be worse than anything she'd faced yet. Aisha Monroe gripped the edge of the SUV's seat, her knuckles aching as Derek barreled through Seattle's pine-lined backroads, the drone's menacing hum fading into the dawn. Nia clung to her lap, her small body still trembling from the warehouse ordeal, her yellow dress torn and streaked with dirt, her pigtails loose and wild. Karen Whitlock's voice, "This ends when you're dead," looped in Aisha's skull, a chilling vow delivered through the buzzing machine that had tracked them. Clarence sat in the back, his army cap lost in the fight, blood crusting on his split lip, his steady breathing a quiet anchor amid the chaos. Derek's eyes flicked to the rear view, his jaw tight, his black hoodie soaked with sweat. "We're clear for now," he muttered, swerving onto a gravel path, the safe house a distant memory swallowed by Karen's relentless hunt. Aisha's ribs throbbed, her jaw bruised from the warehouse thug's graze, but Nia's warmth kept her grounded. She'd rescued her daughter, defied the odds, But the trial loomed, a battlefield where survival hung on a razor's edge. They ditched the SUV by noon, holing up in a nondescript motel on the city's fringes, its neon sign flickering vacancy above a peeling door. Derek's team regrouped, Lena and Jamal hauling laptops and files into the cramped room, the air thick with stale cigarette smoke and desperation. Aisha washed Nia's face in the sink, the girl's soft, "Mama, it hurts," piercing her as she dabbed a scrape on her cheek. "I know, baby girl," Aisha whispered, kissing her forehead, her own hands shaking as she tucked her into a lumpy bed. The trial started tomorrow, the lawsuit her last stand against Karen and the airline, and Derek was a machine, briefing her on testimony, drilling her on Vance's corruption, prepping for the jury. "We've got the emails, the video," he said, his voice steady. "They're cornered." Aisha nodded, her borrowed blazer swapped for a sweatshirt, her resolve steeling. Cornered beasts fought hardest, and Karen's drone proved they weren't done biting. The federal courthouse rose like a monolith in downtown Seattle, its stone facade cold under a gray sky as Aisha stepped inside the next morning, Nia safe with Marla, the activist, at a hidden location. Derek walked beside her, his suit crisp again, his 6'3" frame a shield against the crush of reporters snapping photos, their flashes blinding. The courtroom buzzed, its wooden benches packed with spectators, the air thick with anticipation. As Aisha took her seat, her heart pounding beneath a simple blouse Lena had scrounged. The jury filed in, 12 faces ranging from stern to curious, and the judge, a gray-haired woman with a no-nonsense stare, banged her gavel, silencing the Derek opened, his voice a thunderclap. "This is about a mother targeted for her race," he said, pointing to Aisha. Pacific Sky Airlines and Karen Whitlock turned a spilled juice into a campaign of terror, arrests, lies, and firebombs. Aisha testified first, her voice raw, but resolute, recounting the flight, the shove, the arrest, the brick, the warehouse. All of it, her words painting a vivid scar across the room. The jury leaned in, some scribbling notes, others wide-eyed as Derek played her recording, Karen's venom, "Can't you control your kid?" echoing off the walls. Then came Karen, summoned to the stand, her navy blazer swapped for a demure gray dress, her blonde bun tight, her face a mask of innocence. Derek tore into her, his questions a barrage. "You pushed my sister. Why lie about an assault?" he pressed, his tone lethal. Karen faltered, her lips twitching. "She lunged at me," she said, her voice thin, but the video played again, exposing her shove, her lies crumbling like dry sand. The jury shifted, murmurs rippling, and the defense lawyer, a slick man named Hargrove, floundered, his objections overruled. Mid-trial, the airline dropped a bomb. Karen was fired, effective immediately, a press release flashing on courtroom screens. "Pacific Sky condemns her actions," it read, a desperate bid to distance themselves. Aisha's chest swelled, a surge of triumph as Karen's head snapped up, her mask cracking, her blue eyes blazing with rage. Derek smirked, leaning to Aisha. "She's out. They're cutting losses." The jury nodded, the tide turning, and Aisha smelled victory, her nightmare's architect toppled. Hargrove called a recess, his face pinched, and Aisha stepped into the hall with Derek, her breath easier, the weight lifting. She'd faced Karen down, watched her fall. Surely this was the endgame, the lawsuit's hammer poised to crush the airline next. But the beast roared back, its claws sharper than ever. The trial resumed, and the airline unleashed their ace. Roger Hale, the CEO, a hulking man with silver hair and a tailored suit that screamed power. He took the stand, his voice smooth as oil, his gray eyes cold. "Ms. Monroe's a con artist," he said, his words measured but venomous. "She staged this for profit. Threats, recordings, all a scam." He slid forged documents across the table. Bank statements showing payouts Aisha never received, emails she never wrote, planning a publicity stunt. The jury frowned, some leaning back, doubt creeping in. Derek objected, his voice a roar. "This is fabricated." But Hale smiled, unshaken, his evidence a meticulous lie, the dates doctored to predate the flight. Aisha's stomach sank, her hands clenching, the courtroom tilting as Hargrove grinned, sensing blood. Derek fought back, cross-examining Hale, with fury, but the CEO parried, his calm a wall. "I've seen her type," Hale said, his tone dripping disdain. "Opportunists exploiting good companies." The jury wavered, a hung verdict looming, whispers of maybe he's right rustling through the benches. Aisha's throat tightened, the wind slipping through her fingers. Karen's firing now a hollow echo against Hale's polished assault. She leaned to Derek, her voice a hiss. "They're framing me again." He nodded, his jaw tight, but the clock ran out. Court adjourned for the night, leaving her victory in tatters. She stumbled into the hall, Derek's hand on her arm, her mind reeling. Hale's lies were a masterstroke, turning her truth into a con, and the jury's doubt was a noose tightening around her neck. The real blow came after dark. Derek drove her to a new hideout, a cabin in the woods 20 miles out. Naya waiting with Marla, her small arms wrapping Aisha in a hug that steadied her. They'd barely settled, the cabin's pine walls creaking in the wind, when headlights flashed through the trees. A black truck roared up, its engine a growl, and before Aisha could react, it swerved, ramming their parked car off a bridge into the icy creek below. The crash echoed, metal twisting as the vehicle plunged 20 feet, water swallowing it in. A frothy gulp. Aisha screamed, Nia shrieking in her arms, her eyes locked on the wreck as two figures leapt from the truck, Hale's goons, their faces masked, fleeing into the night. Derek bolted outside, his gun drawn, but they were gone, the truck's taillights vanishing into the dark. Aisha clutched Nia, her daughter's cries piercing the silence, the creek's rush a grim soundtrack to the near-fatal strike. She'd been in that car hours ago, Nia beside her. Hale hadn't just aimed to discredit her, he'd meant to kill her, to silence her before the jury could rule. Derek stormed back, his hoodie soaked from the mist, his voice a snarl. "They're playing for keeps now." Aisha nodded, her breath ragged, the cabin's walls no shield against this. The trial had stripped Karen bare, fired her, but Hale's testimony in this attack flipped it all. A counterstrike so brutal it left her dangling over an abyss. She watched the creek from the window, Nia's sobs softening, the wrecked car a twisted relic of her fleeting win. The jury reconvened tomorrow, but this wasn't just a courtroom fight anymore. It was life or death, and Hale held the gavel. Derek paced, his phone buzzing as Lena traced the truck, registered to a shell company, Hale's fingerprints all over it. "We've got a shot," he said, his eyes meeting Aisha's. "Expose this, sway them back." But Aisha's mind churned, the crash replaying. Hale's calm lies a mask for murder. She'd thought Karen was the beast, but Hale was the head, his power dwarfing her every move. The trial's endgame loomed, a verdict that could free her or bury her. But surviving the night came first. Naya's small hand gripped hers, her voice, a whisper. "Mama, they're mean." Aisha kissed her, her resolve stealing. "Yeah, baby, but we're tougher." She had to be. Hale's next blow would aim to finish her, and she'd be damned if she let it land. Aisha Monroe crouched in the icy creek, her breath fogging in the pre-dawn chill, her arms aching as she clawed her way up the muddy bank. Nia clutched tight against her chest. The wrecked car lay twisted below, its hood crumpled in the water, a mangled testament to Roger Hale's murderous intent. The truck's headlights had vanished into the night, Hale's goons fleeing after ramming their vehicle off the bridge, but the echo of the crash still roared in her ears. Nia whimpered, her small body shivering in her torn yellow dress, her pigtails plastered with mud, her wide eyes locked on the wreckage. "Mama, it's broken," she whispered, and Aisha kissed her forehead, her own voice ragged. "Yeah, baby. Girl, but we're not." Derek loomed above, his black hoodie drenched, his gun still drawn as he scanned the woods, his 6'3" frame taut with fury. The cabin's pine walls glowed faintly in the distance, a fragile refuge against the storm Hale had unleashed. Aisha stumbled to her feet, her sneakers slipping on the slick earth, her ribs screaming from the warehouse fight, her jaw throbbing from the thug's graze. The trial's fleeting triumph, Karen's firing, the jury's sway, had dissolved into this, a near-fatal strike that left her dangling over an abyss. Derek grabbed her arm, hauling her up, his voice a low growl. They missed. But they'll try again. We're moving. He led them back to the cabin, its door ajar, wind whistling through as Marla rushed out, her braids swinging, her face pale. "You're alive!" she gasped, pulling Nia into a hug. But Aisha's eyes stayed on the creek, the car's twisted frame a warning carved in steel. Hale wasn't just fighting the lawsuit, he was erasing her, and Nia was collateral. Inside, the cabin's warmth did little to thaw the ice in Aisha's veins. She wrapped Nia in a blanket, the girl curling into her lap, her small hands clutching Aisha's sweatshirt. Derek's team regrouped, Lena bursting in with her tablet, her wiry frame trembling. "Truck's a ghost. Shell company hails. Name buried in the paper trail," she said, tapping the screen. Jamal followed, his briefcase spilling files, his stocky build hunched over a laptop. "We've got the jurors' texts, Vance's emails, enough to tie this to Whitlock's crew." Derek paced, his eyes blazing. "Then we dig deeper," he said, his voice ablade. "Hale's not clean. Nobody this bold is. Find the dirt." Aisha watched, her mind churning, the crash replaying. Headlights, the jolt, the plunge. She'd survived by inches, rage now fueling her where fear had gripped. "He's a supremacist," she said, her tone flat but certain. That's the thread. Derek seized it, his team diving into Hale's past. Old lawsuits, buried complaints, whispers of ties to hate groups. By noon, Lena struck gold, a photo from a decade back. Hale at a rally, arm raised beside a white-robed figure, a swastika, flag flapping behind. "Private server leak," she said, her voice tight. He scrubbed it, but not deep enough. Jamal cross-checked, pulling donor lists. Hale's name linked to a militia front, cash funneled through shell accounts. Derek grinned, a predator's gleam. "This is it. Racist kingpin running an airline. We leak it." Aisha nodded, her hands steadying as she cradled Nia, the girl dozing against her. The trial reconvened at 3, and they'd wield this like a sledgehammer. Hale's mask ripped off, his empire exposed. They hit the press first, Derek's contacts flooding newsrooms with the photo, the donor lists, a dossier thick with proof. By 2, it was everywhere. CNN, Twitter, local stations, headlines screaming, "Airline CEO tied to hate groups." Aisha watched it spread from Derek's laptop, the cabin's Wi-Fi spotty but enough, her pulse quickening as Rager Hale unmasked trended. The jury would see it. The judge, the world. Hale's con artist lie wouldn't stand against this. She showered Nia, dressing her in a spare outfit from Marla, her own borrowed blazer swapped for a clean shirt, her resolve a fire stoked by every near miss. They rolled into court, Derek's SUV weaving through reporters, Aisha's heart pounding. As she stepped inside, Nia safe with Marla again, the stakes never higher. The courtroom buzzed, the jury's faces tense as the judge banged her gavel, her gray eyes narrowing at the chaos. Derek opened, his voice a thunderclap. "New evidence," he said, slamming the dossier on the table, the photo projected on a screen. Hale's smirk beside that flag, undeniable. Roger Hale's not just a liar, he's a bigot with blood on his hands. The gallery gasped, reporters scribbling, and Hale took the stand, his silver hair gleaming, his calm fraying, as Derek tore in. "You funded hate, rammed my sisters. Why?" Hale stammered, his oil-smooth voice cracking. "Lies, all lies," he said. But the jury shifted, their doubt flipping as the donor lists flashed, his shell companies laid bare. Karen sat in the back, her gray dress rumpled, her firing now a footnote as Hale's shadow swallowed her. The defense floundered, Hargrove's slick grin gone, his objections drowned by the judge's sharp rulings. Aisha testified again, her voice steady, recounting the crash, the drone, the warehouse, tying it to Hale's empire, her words a rope around his neck. The jury deliberated, 3 hours stretching like years, and Aisha waited in the hall, Derek beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "We've got this," he said, but her gut twisted, Hale's cold eyes haunting her. The verdict came at dusk, guilty. Karen convicted of assault and conspiracy, Hale nailed for defamation and attempted murder, 10 million awarded. The gallery erupted, cheers shaking the walls, and Aisha exhaled, her knees weak as Derek hugged. Her, his rare smile breaking through. Triumph at last. A hammer dropped on their tormentors. They stepped outside, the Seattle sky bruising purple, reporters swarming as Aisha shielded her face, the wind sinking in. She'd face them down, expose their rot. One for Nia, for herself. Derek drove her back to the cabin, Nia rushing into her arms, her small voice bright. "Mama, you're a hero!" Aisha laughed, tears streaking, the weight lifting, until a crack split the air, a sniper's bullet grazing her shoulder, searing her flesh as she stumbled. Nia screamed, Derek yanking them behind the SUV, his gun drawn as he scanned the trees. Blood trickled down Aisha's arm, hot and sticky, her breath shallow as she clutched Nia, the pain a distant roar beneath the shock. A note fluttered from a branch pinned by a second shot. "You'll never be safe," scrawled in black, a vow from the shadows. Derek fired into the pines, the crack echoing, but the shooter was gone, a ghost in the dusk. Aisha pressed her hand to the wound, her shirt soaking red, her mind racing. The verdict had crushed Karen and Hale, locked them away, but their network lived, a hydra with heads still snapping. "They're not done," Derek muttered, his eyes wild as he tore his hoodie, binding her shoulder. Marla rushed out, her braids swinging, pulling Nia inside as Clarence hobbled from the cabin, his split lip reopened, his voice steady. "Militia hit. Hale's dogs don't quit." Aisha's head spun, the wind hollowed by this strike, the bullet a whisper of worse to come. She'd fought back, toppled giants, but the war wasn't over. It had just begun, a vendetta deeper than the courtroom. They retreated inside, Derek barricading the door, Lena tracing the sniper's likely perch on her tablet, Jamal dialing cops who'd arrived too late. Aisha sat, Nia in her lap, her shoulder throbbing under the makeshift bandage, her blood staining the floor. The lawsuit's millions meant nothing if they couldn't breathe, and Hale's empire, even caged, had claws that reached beyond bars. She'd survived the crash, the fire, the warehouse, but this was a new beast. Precise, patient, lethal. Derek knelt beside her, his hand gripping hers, his voice low. "We'll root 'em out, Aisha. Every last one." She nodded, her eyes burning, Nia's small hand in hers a lifeline. The verdict was hers, a battle won. But the sniper's shot was a promise. Their fight was far from over, and the next blow could be the last. Aisha stared at the note, its jagged letters a taunt, her resolve steeling despite the pain. Karen was gone, Hale locked up, but their shadows lingered, a network vowing revenge she couldn't outrun. The cabin's walls creaked, the night pressing in, and she knew safety was a lie. They'd strike again, harder, deadlier. She kissed Nia's head, her voice a whisper. "We're tougher, baby girl." But her eyes met Derek's, his grim nod a pact. They'd fight, they'd bleed, they'd win, or they'd fall together. The sniper's miss was a warning, and Aisha braced for the storm, knowing it'd take everything she had left to survive. Aisha Monroe sat in the cabin's dim light, her shoulder throbbing under Derek's makeshift bandage, blood seeping through the torn hoodie as Nia clung to her lap, her small hands trembling against Aisha's sweatshirt. The sniper's bullet had grazed her, a searing reminder of the network's reach, its note, "You'll never be safe," crumpled on the pine floor beside her. The Seattle night pressed against the barred windows, the wind howling through the trees, a relentless wail that matched the storm in her chest. Derek paced, his gun gripped tight, his 6'3" frame coiled like a spring, his dark eyes scanning the shadows beyond the glass. Marla huddled with Nia's pillow fort, her braids tucked under a scarf, her voice soft as she hummed to calm the girl. Clarence leaned against the wall, his split lip crusted, his army-honed instincts sharp, despite the exhaustion etching his face. The verdict had locked Karen Whitlock and Roger Hale away, a $10 million win. But the sniper's shot proved their empire lived, its claws slashing deeper than Aisha had feared. Derek stopped, his boots scuffing the floor, his voice a low growl. "We can't stay here, they'll hit again." He holstered his gun, pulling a duffel from under the couch, stuffing it with clothes, laptops, files. "Safe house number 3, east side. Cops won't find it." Aisha nodded, her throat raw, the weight of Nia's warmth grounding her as she stood, her legs shaky but resolute. "We end this," she said, her tone steel despite the pain. "No more running." Derek met her gaze, his jaw tight, a flicker of pride cutting through his fury. "Agreed. I'm joining a federal task force. Hale's network's too big. For us alone. You testify, we dismantle it." Aisha's pulse quickened. The snipers miss a spark igniting her fight. She'd survived too much. Arrests, firebombs, crashes to let them win now. Nia's small hand gripped hers, and she vowed to burn their empire down, brick by racist brick. They moved at dawn, Derek's SUV cutting through fog-drenched streets. The safe house a squat concrete bunker in an industrial sprawl, its walls thick, its windows blacked out. Aisha settled Nia on a cot, her daughter's eyes heavy as she clutched a borrowed stuffed bear Marla had scrounged, a stand-in for her lost unicorn. Lena and Jamal swept in, laptops humming, tracing the sniper's rifle, a militia-grade weapon linked to Hale's donor lists. "Feds are on it," Lena said, her wiry frame taut as she typed. "Task force launches tomorrow," Derek briefed. Aisha, his voice steady. "You'll testify. Names, dates, everything we've got. They'll raid every hideout, every bank account." Aisha nodded, her shoulder aching, the blood dried but the wound raw. She'd face a grand jury, her voice, a weapon to shred the network, but the sniper's note gnawed at her. Safety was a ghost, and she braced for the next strike. The day stretched, tense and quiet. Nia coloring on the cot, her crayons scraping paper as Aisha paced, her mind replaying every blow, the spill, the arrest, the fire, the crash. She'd won the trial, toppled Karen and Hale, but their shadows lingered, a hydra with head still snapping. Derek's phone buzzed, a federal contact confirming the task force's scope. Dozens of agents, nationwide sweeps. Hale's militia ties the key. "They're scared," he said, pocketing it. "Your testimony's the nail." Aisha's resolve hardened, her pain a fuel. She'd bury them, for Nia, for every soul they'd crushed. Night fell, the bunker's silence a fragile shield, and she thought, just for a moment, they'd outrun the storm. Then the door exploded inward, a deafening crash that shattered the quiet, and Karen Whitlock stormed in, a gun gleaming in her hand, her blonde bun wild, her gray dress swapped for black tactical gear. Aisha's breath stopped, Nia screaming, as she dove behind the cot, her small body curling tight. Derek lunged for his gun, but Karen fired, a shot cracking into the wall inches from his head, plaster spraying. "Don't!" she snarled, her voice a venomous hiss, her blue eyes blazing with hate. "I'm fixing my mistake." Aisha froze, her shoulders searing as she shielded Nia, her mind reeling. Karen was out on bail, a glitch Derek's team had missed, her network springing her free. Clarence tackled Lena out of the line of fire, Jamal scrambling for his briefcase, but Karen swung the gun, her smirk a dagger. "You thought you'd win?" she spat, stepping closer, her heels grinding, glass from the busted door. "Hale's down, but I'm not. Your little video, your lawsuit? Dust." Aisha's heart pounded, her eyes darting. Derek pinned, Nia exposed, no way out. Karen's gun trained on her, steady and cold, her finger twitching on the trigger. "Drop the testimony," she said, her tone lethal. "Or she's first." Nia whimpered, and Aisha surged, rage drowning fear, her voice a roar. "You won't touch her!" She lunged, no weapon but her hands, aiming for the gun, her shoulders screaming as she crashed into Karen. They hit the floor, a tangle of limbs, the pistol skidding as Aisha clawed, her nails raking Karen's face, blood welling under her fingers. Karen thrashed, her strength feral, a fist slamming Aisha's jaw, stars bursting in her vision. Derek dove in, his arm locking Karen's throat, but a second figure burst through, scar-faced, wiry, the warehouse thug, his own gun blazing. A shot grazed Derek's leg, blood spraying as he stumbled, and Aisha rolled, wrenching Karen's arm, the flight attendant's scream a jagged wail. The thug fired again, the bullet ricocheting off concrete, and Clarence tackled him. His vet grit a blur as he smashed the man's wrist, the gun clattering free. Aisha pinned Karen, her knees on her chest, her hands wrenching the woman's hair, fury a wildfire in her veins. "You're done," she hissed, slamming Karen's head to the floor, the crack echoing as the fight bled out of her. Then the twist hit. The thug, pinned by Clarence, swung wild, his free hand snatching his own gun, the barrel swinging not at Aisha, but at Karen. A shot rang out, deafening in the bunker's tight space, and Karen jerked, blood blooming on her chest, her eyes wide with shock as she slumped, lifeless. Aisha recoiled, Nia's scream piercing her ears, her hands slick with Karen's blood as she scrambled back. The thug laughed, a guttural rasp, his scarred face twisted. "Boss said clean house. She's baggage." Derek lunged, kicking, the gun away, pinning the man as sirens wailed, feds storming in, their vests a blur of black against the chaos. Aisha crawled to Nia, pulling her close, her daughter's sobs shaking them both as agents swarmed, cuffing the thug, medics rushing, to Derek's leg. Karen lay still, her blood pooling, her death a shockwave that flipped everything. Aisha stared, her breath shallow, the gun's echo ringing. The network hadn't just sprung Karen, they'd cut her loose, a liability erased in their own brutal cleanup. Derek limped over, his leg bandaged, his voice rough. "She's gone." "Aisha." They turned on her. Aisha nodded, her mind spinning. The thug's words, "Boss said," a clue to a deeper head, Hale's empire shedding its skin to survive. The feds took over, hauling the thug away, his cackle fading as they sealed the scene. Aisha held Nia, her shoulder bleeding anew, her jaw swollen, but her spirit unbroken. "We're safe now, baby girl," she whispered, the lie softer this time. Nia's nod a fragile trust. Derek sank beside her, his hand on her arm, his eyes steady. "Task force is live, I'm in. You testify, we finish this." Aisha met his gaze, her resolve a blade honed by every scar. The spill, the arrests, the fire, the crash, now this. Karen's death wasn't the end. It was a pivot, her blood a spark igniting a revolution she'd never intended. They moved. Again, a federal safe house this time. Its steel doors a fortress as Aisha prepped her testimony, names and dates spilling from her lips to agents scribbling notes. The network's betrayal of Karen was a crack, a window into a beast bigger than Hale, and she'd pry it wide. Nia slept beside her, the bear clutched tight, her small face calm for the first time in days. Aisha traced her daughter's cheek, her voice a vow. "They'll pay, baby." Derek joined the feds at dawn, his limp a badge as he swore to hunt, every route, and Aisha stood, her survival a legend rising from the ashes. She stepped to the window, the city sprawling below, her reflection a battered warrior, bloodied, bruised, unbroken. Karen's death was a twist she hadn't seen. The thug shot flipping the script, her tormentor felled by her own. The trial's win, the millions paled beside this. Her voice had toppled giants, but it had birthed a movement, a fight beyond her own. The network loomed, its next strike a shadow she'd face head-on, Nia her reason, Derek her shield. She turned from the glass, her eyes fierce. The revolution hers to lead, knowing the war raged on, fiercer, deadlier, hers to win. Aisha Monroe's journey in Flight Attendant humiliates black single mom, realizes too late who her lawyer is, offers profound lessons about resilience, systemic injustice, and the power of standing up. First, it shows that courage isn't the absence of fear but the will to fight through it. Aisha faced arrests, firebombs, and a sniper's bullet, yet never stopped protecting Nia or seeking justice. Her story underscores that racism isn't just personal slights. It's a network of power, from Karen's venom to Hale's empire, thriving on silence. Breaking that silence, as Aisha did with her viral video and testimony, can spark change, even when the cost is steep. Second, it reveals the strength of family and community. Derek's legal prowess and Clarence's grit turned her lone stand into a collective triumph, proving no one fights alone. Third, it warns of victory's fragility. Karen's death and the network's persistence show that winning battles doesn't end wars. Vigilance is key. Finally, it's a call to action. Injustice festers where voices falter, and Aisha's survival turned her pain into a revolution, urging us to speak, resist, and endure. So, What's your takeaway? Have you faced a moment where standing up changed everything, or wish you had? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Hit like if Aisha's fight resonates, subscribe for more tales of grit, and share to spread her story. Thanks for joining this journey. May you find strength to face your own battles and rise unbroken.